Yo, it's your boy Mike Wilson. You probably remember me as 2-5 from the Sports Reports Disorder podcast. I wanted to take some time out of my day and I wanted to talk to y'all about my bracket because as you've probably heard on the podcast, March Madness is one of my favorite things. I take off every year Thursday and Friday just so I can watch March Madness. Unfortunately, this year on Friday, I got to do some Six Flags too, but I'll get it all in on Thursday. Me and Raph will probably come to y'all with updates throughout the day as the games are going on. But real quick, I just wanted to run through my bracket, give y'all some rationale, show you how my mind works. So let's get into it. So first of all, we're going to start off with the South region, which shows Alabama as the number 1 seed, Arizona is the 2, and Baylor is the 3. So this was probably the easiest bracket I felt of all the regions for me to fill out, which makes sense because Alabama is your overall number 1 seed. So I have Alabama playing West Virginia in the second round. So West Virginia, who by the way went 7-11 in the Big 12, we got to do something about this. Under 500, okay. 500, okay. 4 games under 500 in your conference, and they're a 9 seed. It just is what it is. But Maryland as the 8 seed away from home, 2-9 this season. I think that was pretty easy to go with West Virginia. San Diego State and Charleston 31-3. How about that? And ended up with a 12 seed. So I think Charleston's going to be that trendy pick where everybody's going to pick Charleston over San Diego State because you got to have your 5-12 upset. There are some other ones out there, people, but I'm just going to go with San Diego State here because I think they're going to lock Charleston down defensively. Then you got Furman and Virginia. Now that's where I think you can get an upset. I got Furman over Virginia. Virginia's just having issues scoring. They have some injuries. They just didn't look good. I mean, even in the ACC title game, they put up 49 points. So I'm going with Furman there. Creighton over NC State because Creighton came into this year a top 10 team. They still have the talent that made everybody think that they were a top 10 team. It just didn't work out that way. But NC State, this is a team that lost to Clemson 3 times, including by 26 the other day in the ACC tournament. The same Clemson that lost to Louisville and Sister Jean. Yeah, no. Baylor over Santa Barbara. I think Santa Barbara has a chance to win this game. This is going to be a game, another one where people are going to pick the upset. Baylor's 2-4 in their last 6 games. Not a good sign, but we've seen in the past that it doesn't necessarily matter going into March. Utah State over Missouri. Somebody has to win that game. I like Utah State's rebounding, but I expect offensive fireworks in that game. So that might be your game of the day in the region as far as points go. Excuse me. Princeton and Arizona, Princeton's always sneaky, but I think Arizona just has too much on the inside. So I'm going with Arizona there, which takes me to the second round. I got Bama over West Virginia. I got San Diego State over Furman, Creighton over Baylor, Arizona over Utah State. That brings me to Bama over San Diego State in the Sweet 16, Creighton over Arizona in the Sweet 16, and then my regional final is Bama and Creighton, with Bama going on to the Final Four for the first time in school history. Now, let's go over to the Midwest region, where you have Houston as the 1 seed, Texas is the 2, and Xavier is the 3. So, Houston, Northern Kentucky, Marcus Sasser has a groin injury, AAC Player of the Year, missed the conference tournament final game that Houston lost to Memphis. They don't need him for Northern Kentucky. Rest them up for Sunday. Then you got Iowa and Auburn. Somehow, excuse me, Auburn gets home field court advantage in Birmingham. So I'm going to pick them just for that reason alone. Iowa, just like Maryland, is awful on the road. Then I got Drake over Miami or Chandler O'Meara. We don't know if he's going to play with the ankle injury. If he doesn't, I feel real confident about this. If he does play, I might have to back off a little bit. But I like Drake. I like Kent State over Indiana. Trace Jackson Davis is going to get his. Nobody else is going to get there. So I'm going with Kent State. I'm going with Iowa State over the first 4 winner, Xavier. missing their third leading scorer. They got Sean Miller back, so that's great. He's their successful coach that they had before he went to Arizona, before he got caught up. So I got Xavier winning over Kennesaw State. Don't be surprised if Kennesaw keeps it a little close. Then you got ATM, Texas A&M against Penn State, where I don't know how A&M got a 7 seed. I thought they should have probably been more like a 5, maybe even possibly a low 4, but I'll say 5. Penn State got to the Big Ten championship game, so they're going to shoot some threes. But I think A&M's defense comes through and saves the day, which sets up a second round matchup with Texas. Colgate can shoot the lights out, but I think Texas just has too much. That takes me to Houston over Auburn, Kent State over Drake, Iowa State pulling the upset over Xavier, and then Texas over A&M, which leads me to Houston against Kent State in the Sweet 16. Houston there, Texas over Iowa State, Houston and Texas for the right to play in Houston. I'm going to go with Houston to pull the upset there. Even though they're the 1 seed, I think most people would see it as an upset if they beat Texas. Let's take it on down to the East region. Purdue is your number 1. Marquette is your number 2. And Kansas State is your number 3. So this is an interesting bracket to me because I feel like Oral Roberts and Duke should both have beef. Because Duke sitting there as the 5 gets a 12 that hasn't lost since around Thanksgiving. And the game that they lost around Thanksgiving was a game that they made up on the spot against New Mexico in the pit. So they haven't lost since then. So from that standpoint, I don't like it if I'm Duke. I don't like it if I'm Oral Roberts. Max, I can't even say his last name, but y'all know who I'm talking about. They went to the Sweet 16 2 years ago. Oral Roberts has the pedigree to beat Duke, but I think Duke's going to win. Purdue's going to handle their 16 seed. Memphis and FAU is going to be better than people think. FAU with the 30 wins on the season, but I got Memphis here. Tennessee over Louisiana. A lot of people are probably going to pick Louisiana because Tennessee has Ziegler out, but I'm going with Tennessee to win that game. Kentucky, my Wildcats against Bryce Hopkins, the former Wildcat in Providence. I'm going to go with Kentucky to win that game. I just think that Calipari's teams, for the most part, obviously there was last year against St. Peter's that proves this wrong, but Calipari's teams usually peak in March. So their defense is going to carry today. Oscar Tshiebwe, the reigning player of the year. I think I like Kentucky in this game. Then you got Kansas State over Montana State, USC and Michigan State in the nobody probably wants to play these teams under a tournament format. I'm going to go with USC, and I'm going to take USC to upset Marquette in the second round. But Marquette, Shaka Smart, beware. Vermont is a staple of March. I'm picking Marquette to win, but would not be shocked if Vermont pulls off that 2-15 upset. So, second round, Purdue and Memphis. I was real tempted to take Memphis here because Purdue has freshman guards, and they're not the John Wall, De'Aaron Fox, Derrick Rose one-and-done type. They're just happen to be freshman point guards. Memphis has Kendrick Davis, who's going to be a nightmare for them. I wouldn't be shocked if Memphis wins, but I'm gonna go with Purdue. I got Duke over Tennessee, in a game that could go either way, but I just think Duke has too much and they're on too much of a roll right now. Kansas State is probably going to knock out my Wildcats. They have Keontae Johnson, a Florida fame. Welcome back, Keontae Johnson. Had the heart issue, collapsed a couple of years ago. He's back. They have Marquise Norvell, who I like a lot. Marquise Noel, who I love a lot. So I got Kansas State over USC. I got Purdue over Duke in the Sweet 16. And then that gives me my regional final of Purdue and K-State. And I think that's where Purdue gets got. Wouldn't be surprised if Purdue got before then. But this is where I got Purdue getting got because Zach Edey is going to be good enough to carry them. But the luck runs out at some point. Finally, the region of death. We got the West region here where Kansas is your 1 seed, UCLA your 2, Gonzaga your 3. So looking at that bracket, I got KU handling Howard, of course. Arkansas over Illinois. That's going to be a tricky game because Illinois is so talented. They just can't put it together for whatever reason. But Arkansas has Nick Smith back, projected top 5 NBA draft pick. I think he's going to show out, improve, and I think Arkansas wins that game. St. Mary's 5-12 against VCU. I am so sorry that these people got you flying across the country to play the early game against a team from Virginia. So just on logistics alone, I'm taking VCU in that game. UConn against Iona. Now, before I get started, I don't get all the UConn love. All season long, they started off 14-0 or whatever it was, and then they started losing. And every time people said UConn is talented, they lose. People say, hey, UConn's won 3 in a row, here it comes. They lose. So, they're going to lose at some point. Iona, I don't think has a chance in this game, but they do have the great Rick Pitino. So, never say never, but I think UConn gets out of there with that one. Then you got TCU against their first 4, either Arizona State or Nevada. So, I think I like TCU in this game, but beware of TCU. Could be fool's gold. They have been getting all the hype. And I think part of it is just the fact that they play in the Big 12. They made a slight little run last year and gave Arizona the 1 seed. They wanted last year. Emphasis on last year. Just saying. Gonzaga over Grand Canyon. Northwestern over Boise State in an underrated game. I think that's going to be a really good game. I think Boise's going to push them. And UCLA. I talked about Marquette. The 2-15 against Vermont. Same thing here. UCLA will win. But Asheville's going to put up a fight, and also we got Jalen Clark out, who is UCLA's best defender, and he's giving you 13-6. So, UCLA, that'll come to bite you later. But not in round 2. I thought about Northwestern over UCLA, but I just can't do it. So I got UCLA going to the Sweet 16 against the winner of Gonzaga and TCU. Now, let's pause for a second. So I told you that TCU was going to be the overhyped team of the tournament. Everybody has them as a faux Final Four pick. They're talented enough. We saw them whoop Kansas in Fog Allen, so I don't want to be disrespectful. But this is where Gonzaga thrives, because every single year we come into the tournament, Gonzaga is probably a little overinflated as far as people thinking that they're a contender. They always have them going to the championship. They always have them in the Final Four. And some years Gonzaga gets out in the Sweet 16. They have a streak right now in the Sweet 16. But this is the year that I think coming in underhyped helps Gonzaga. So I think they beat TCU in that game. Go on to beat UCLA in a third rematch from the NCAA tournament the last couple of years. I got Kansas over UConn because I got UConn taking out VCU. Arkansas can beat Kansas. They can. They won't. So I got Kansas over UConn and I got Gonzaga over UCLA. So my regional final, aka the Elite 8, is Gonzaga over Kansas. So for those of you keeping track, the Final Four that I came up with is Bama out of the South, K-State out of the East, Houston out of the Midwest, and Gonzaga out of the West. So what I end up with is Bama beating K-State, and I got Gonzaga over Houston, and then I got Gonzaga losing the national title game to Alabama somewhere around 78-73. Takeaways: I would love to see Houston win the national title. I really like Houston. Marcus Sasser has that groin injury, and we all know groins. Soft tissue injury. He might play some of these games. He might come back, but it's going to be easy to re-aggravate. So that's going to be, where it comes out at. Like, can he stay healthy? That's going to tell the story about Houston. I really hope we get that Houston UT game, in the Elite 8 on the way to the Final Four. Because for one, I know UT avoids Houston at every chance, whether it's football, whether it's basketball. So I want Houston to get their chance. And if they lose, they lose. But I want them to get their chance. Auburn, I don't know why the hell they in the region where they get home court advantage by playing in Birmingham. It makes no sense to me, but I don't make the brackets. Arkansas, like I mentioned, NBA talent all over the roster. But Kansas has Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson. So, Kansas actually has a very good shot to repeat, but they just happen to play in the region of death. That's where Kansas, I think, gets caught up. It's just the region itself. People are going to cannibalize. But the good news is, Kansas, you don't have to play every one of these teams in this region. You just have to play who gets through. TCU, like I said, they're probably my most overhyped team of the tournament as far as coming into the tournament. And I learned a long time ago, you don't trust Jamie Dixon. You think about all those Pitt teams he had as 2 seeds, a 3 seed, and half of the time they didn't even get out the first weekend. So same thing with Texas. I felt a little scared picking them all the way to the Elite Eight because they just don't typically have tournament success in that way. Iowa State, TJ Otzelberger. He's the reason why I have them going to the Sweet 16. He's one of the best coaches in the country. You won't know it by looking at Iowa State's record, but watch them. They did lose Tyrese Hunter, who is now at Texas. So if they don't get there, that's probably going to be why, because they're missing him. UCLA missing Jalen Clark. I probably would have picked them to win this region if they had him. That's honest. I probably would have. But they don't, so I didn't. Creighton, as I mentioned, top 10 coming into the season. It didn't work out that way, but they still got the talent that made people pick them that way. Baylor's defense, where did it go? That was one of their staples. Arizona, I like to call them a paper tiger because this is a team that did lose to Washington State and Utah, along with Xavier, who lost to Butler and DePaul. You lose to Butler and DePaul, I can't pick you to my Final Four. That just is what it is. San Diego State has been good for so long, and they haven't had their breakthrough. If they could get to the Sweet 16, like I think, match up with Bama, that'll be a shot, but Bama's going to beat them. Brandon Miller, a.k.a. the new Paul George, is going to come through unless he gets distracted, unless these fans bring up all the things that, are pending and going through with him. So Purdue, like I mentioned, freshman guards, but they're not of that one and done variety. So Memphis could get them round 2. FAU could get them. Purdue could literally lose to anybody in this bracket that is not Tennessee just because of the Ziegler injury. Their 16 seed, Louisiana, Providence, Montana State. They could probably lose to everybody else in this bracket. And that's not disrespect. And as a wise man says, that's not an insult. It's just a fact of life. I'm looking at Furman here in Virginia. That's going to be a great game. I'm anxious for that game. The Paladins, I got pulling that upset. Charleston, I would love to see do something good, but I think San Diego State's been hearing it all week. Ever since the bracket came out, all you've heard is Charleston's going to win this game. Miami, if Mir can play, they have the ability to get to the Elite Eight, potentially the Final Four, which includes upsetting Houston. Kentucky, my team, feast or famine. I can see them all the way to the Elite Eight. I can see them losing in the first round. They're just that inconsistent. Duke has been a Final Four pick for everybody just about. I think they get slept by Purdue, but I can understand why people are picking Duke. They're 17-1 with all their starters healthy, so you can't knock that. You can't knock that. I could see I could see Duke getting to the Final Four, setting up a game against Alabama. That would just be lovely to see. Even as the number 1 Duke hater in the world, that would be a great game. I'm looking at USC here. Andy Enfield has got those guys playing well. I think, like I said, I think they beat Marquette. Marquette is not only the Big East regular season champ, but they won the conference tournament. They have Shaka Smart, who took VCU to the Final Four, but I just don't believe in the Big East that much this year. Gonzaga, like I said, quiet as kept. People aren't talking about them the way that they normally do. People aren't giving them the respect that they normally get, and I'm not even saying that they deserve it, because they probably don't. But as a 3 seed, quietly matching up with TCU in the second round, they wouldn't play Kansas until the Elite Eight. And then they could possibly get either UCLA without Jalen Clark in the Sweet 16. So I would pick them there, which I did. Or they could play Northwestern or Boise State. So if I'm Gonzaga, I feel pretty good about my chances to get at least to the Elite Eight. So once again, my Final Four was Bama, K-State, Houston, and Gonzaga. So, if I didn't pick those teams, I would have liked Creighton, possibly Duke, Texas, and Kansas. And I would have probably picked Kansas to repeat in an alternate universe. I do think Kansas has the ability to repeat. But that's where I am right now. Bama 78-73 over Gonzaga for the national title. Mike Wilson, a.k.a. 2-5. March Madness is my thing. Share with me your picks and your brackets, and we'll talk about it on the other side. And if I'm wrong, I'll salute you, tell you I was wrong. Because after all, we're here for the fun. We're here for the madness. Peace.